do think Stephen King tried to give guardrails, give processes. I just think his messaging was really cluttered and clunky and sometimes contradictory.
Yeah. And I think that's why I don't think it's you know what it is? It's Mandy Patinkin in The Princess Bride going, I don't think that means what you think it means.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't love you any more than I do right now.
So I feel a little bit like that with him sometimes, because when he's describing his situations, I'm like, wouldn't that just be your plot?
See, that's so funny though, because I feel like he's so confident in everything that he's saying, but what he's saying is so wishy-washy and changes by the minute. It's kind of like a current presidential candidate that I know. And occasionally, it didn't make any sense to me at all, which similarly, feels very reminiscent of our current political climate a little bit. And so I just truly wish, if you were going to give us your instruction manual your way, be super authentic about it and lean all the way into it and state that from the beginning. It's sort of like how I had my little hissy fit about the CV in the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't want a third of a book about your life history and experience when you have sold this book to me as a book about writing and the writing process.
Yeah.
I found that exceptionally annoying. You set my expectations in one place and you hosed me, sir. You didn't deliver until I had to put in a huge amount of investment on shit that, quite frankly, didn't do what I think you thought it was going to do, which is you thought it was giving all this insight into how you developed as a writer and how you got to be who you are. And as I think a famous person you thought people cared about. And again, lots of them probably did. I was not that audience. Great, you're famous. I found you really funny on Twitter back in the day when I was on that platform before it went to the dark side. I don't care about the other stuff. I wanted to hear from you about how to be a better writer. The other thing I found exceptionally funny, but in a cringy sort of way, is his take on writing seminars.
Oh,
He's such an asshole. I'm doubtful about writing classes, but not entirely against them. And then proceeds to slam...
He was a teacher, by the way.
Slam writers' workshops. You wrote a book about how to write. What do you think you're doing?
I know, it's so hypocritical. Because, like, I have conflicting feelings about, like, creative writing courses. I think that they can be a great place for some people who, especially if you don't have time, to basically make that time.
Set it aside and do it.
So that you can do it. But I also feel like sometimes the guardrails they set up are very constricting.
Yeah.
And I do worry sometimes, like, can people be as creative as maybe they want to be or normally would be if they have an instructor who maybe just doesn't like their writing and kind of goes, well, you really should have done X, Y, and Z. And it's not a exact example, but I just remember being in 7th grade and I was in an algebra class and I had gotten to the correct answer, but I had done it outside of the way the instructor wanted us to.
Got it.
And I showed my work, like my work was there and she saw it and she didn't say that it was wrong.
But it wasn't her way.
Yep. She's like, that's not how you were supposed to get there. You were supposed to do all this. And it's like, but I got the right answer. I showed all my work and you're not even telling me that I shouldn't have done it this way because this could have been wrong. Because, like, you and I have to help people in our job, right?
Yeah.
And we have to explain things.
And people can do things different ways and still get to the right place.
Yes. And there are some things you have to do the same way, or you lucked out this time and it worked, but actually you got lucky because...
It could be catastrophic.
It's not always going to be this way. Your formula isn't an actual formula. It was a fluke. And in this case, no, she couldn't even tell me that
your way was wrong.
Method was wrong, because I think I would have felt differently about it if she'd at least been like, you just got lucky this time because if this had been this way, your formula here wasn't a formula, it was a fluke.
Are you sure you're not just still pissed that you didn't get the points?
Oh, I'm still pissed at her. She was the worst. I ended up getting stuck retaking algebra because of that question, by the way. And when I went into high school, because it was just before, basically, so it must have been 8th grade.
Oh my God.
I had to retake algebra because, and she even said, oh, it's because you did it that way and not the way you were supposed to. And
that
so she
one
would
question?
not sign off on the form to say that I could go into geometry. So, yeah, she's a bitch.
Holy crap.
I have a math degree now, by the way. Thank you. She was kind of old, so I don't know that she's still alive, but if she was, and she hears this right now, I got a math degree.
We're working through some shit here on this podcast.
But that's my worry with, like, creative writing classes, because I know I've taken, like, some, and they are a little bit like, no, you gotta do these things, and it's like, but I want to do, like, a little bit, can I do it, but, like, kind of deviate? No. Bars.
See, and I've always had teachers who, I remember my high school creative writing class, and he was like, here's the prompt, right? This much or more. And then if you weren't in a space to write during that set 45 minutes you were supposed to be in that class, you could do anything else and you just turn it in the following week. Like, there was so much room to just acknowledgement that in this set 45 minutes, maybe this is not your best space for writing. Maybe you need to be in a set space with a closed door and at home or on your couch or whatever the case may be. That I've not run into that. And in college, the class that I took was equally open. There was some push to like, okay, I see this. You got this. Can you develop that more? Which I loved. I like it when I get positive and constructive in the writing realm. But I've not found restrictions in a way that have stuck with me quite the way that you have. So I always found those to be really positive spaces. I know that won't be everyone's experience.
Yeah.
But I found the irony dripping that he's pretty openly, but not disdainful of writing classes, and then proceeds to write a wishy-washy writing class in the form of a book.
Well, and I think that you had actually talked about it in the last episode of when we were looking at this, and his thing about not letting them have the one kind of essays when he was an instructor.
Yes.
And it's like, he is the writing instructor. I would be concerned who's going to throw down rules that aren't going to let me write the way I want to write, because I mean, he had nothing but disdain for people he felt wanted this, like, easy essay type. Yes. I can't even remember what kind it was, but
like a one-pager on if Jesus was your teammate or something. It was really snarky and gross.
Yeah, it's like, no, let them write, because that could be, God, I can think of a great story with that. Like, if Jesus was my teammate, okay, is it Jesus or is it Jesus?
Yahweh, actually.
Yahweh? Like, what are we calling him? What number is he going to be? Like, that is really important to me. We need to figure out his number.
I think it's going to be Steph Curry's number, because it's friggin' Steph Curry.
And then, like, what sport are we playing? That's a great question there, too.
Well, it was also so snarky because it was the footballers and the cheerleaders, and it was like, they're all this.
Oh my God, Jesus is a cheerleader?
Oh my gosh, we're writing that someday when we have time.
Like, I've made the situation, Stephen King. You could have done this, and that's my point, is like, you chose to be a shitty teacher of writing classes.
If I may, he continues to choose to be a shitty teacher in this book. I actually wrote, who is he talking to? Because there are many times throughout this book where he addresses the reader directly. And I will say, many of them are condescending. Many of those side comments are snarky and rude and really dismissive. And I was like, am I, the reader, a buddy? And I'm like, oh no. There's occasional times where he is a little like, elbow, hey, you got this. But they're few and far between compared to the times where he just talks directly to the reader as though you are an illiterate dumbass that somehow fell onto this book and someone much smarter than you is trying to explain it to you. And then I wrote, am I your least favorite student ever? Your mentee? I am, again, just wishing he would pick a lane. Like, if you're going to be my adversary in this, bring it, bitch. If you're going to be my teacher, I hope to the heavens this is not the kind of teacher you were. But I suspect you were. If we're friends, talk to me like a friend. And if you're my mentor, I'm out. I could not take your advice because, one, I don't really understand what the fuck you're trying to say to me. It seems to change page by page. And two, sincerely, you seem to have a not so low level of disdain for me, the reader.
That's fair.
Did you feel that at all?
I think that's why I got like so worked up about like if you don't have time to read and write, then you can't write or some shit, or if you don't have time to read, you don't have time to write then. And it's like I don't get to live in that world. I wish I could spend more time reading.
Of course.
You know, it was really nice to finish a book this morning. I am looking forward to the stack of books that I have to read that I probably won't actually have time to really read. And this podcast has also shown me the like difference in that. Because like when you read the book slowly for the sake of analyzing it, books hit different when you do it that way. Because the book that I did just finish reading this morning, I've read it before. Oh. I knew how it was going to end. I knew what was going to happen. I knew I couldn't remember parts of it. And I probably didn't understand parts of it because I read it years ago when it had come out. It's still a fucking phenomenal book. There's a reason I reread it, and I'm telling you, read Gideon the Ninth. It's so good. But I have a giant TBR. You've seen my garage filled with books. Books I have not read. Books I would someday love to read.
Yeah.
And I chose to reread a book because I also just don't have much time. And as it was, I did it in a mix of reading the physical book and mixing in the audio book because, like, I know last week I was sitting there working a little bit and I had it going because I was really getting close towards the end. And I'm like, I want to finish this book. I listened to it some while I did a puzzle. I crocheted a bit while I listened to it because, like, there's a lot of things I enjoy doing.
She can do it all, people.
And there's only so many hours in the damn day. And I have to sleep at some point. And I don't have a choice but to work.
I found myself writing in the margins of the book. And my interactions, my engagement with the book got progressively more and more hostile. It went from, huh? Why would you say this? To, you jackass. Who the fuck are you talking to, sir? Like, It just, my responses to the way he speaks to me as a reader got progressively more and more irritable because I really felt like he was provoking and talking down to me.
I can agree with that. I don't feel like... You know what? Let's actually go back to the ideal reader. Do you actually think that Tabitha was his ideal reader with this? Or did he go someplace else? Like, who was the ideal reader?
According to him, it was his wife.
And it's just like, I can't imagine talking to your wife like this.
He really loves her. It's one of the sweeter moments when he talks about his wife and how much he respects and reveres her and how she takes no shit. And I don't know if she's just that one person in his life that could look at him and go, shut the fuck up. And he would. Or if their dynamic is different from his perception, as I think a lot of things are. But I think in his mind it's true. Whether it's actually true or not, oh no, I have doubts. He's talking about if you want to be a successful writer, you must be able to describe it and in a way that will cause your reader to prickle with recognition. So far, so good, right? Okay, that seems like a worthwhile tidbit and goal to work towards. If you can do this, you will be paid for your labors, and deservedly so. creeping onto the judgy territory. If you can't, you're going to collect a lot of rejection slips and perhaps explore a career in the fascinating world of telemarketing. Ass! You raging asshole! I don't know if you're trying to be funny, but in that moment, you are speaking directly to your reader. And I don't find you cute or funny or, I don't know. He strikes me as a dude who, if he were younger in this day and age, would do the negging. Would
Absolutely.
do the, oh, this piece of fiction is so brilliant, except for these 17 things you fucked up because you're stupid. I don't like that guy. That guy can fuck all the way off. Oh, that was the other thing that really did not land well with me, because I like to swear. If you use swearing in your writing, it's because you're ignorant. His
Given how
word,
much
not
he
mine.
uses it is really funny.
Couple chapters later, you have to speak honestly. You have to write from an honest place. And because of where and how he grew up, swearing is fine because that's his authentic self. And I just sort of gritted my teeth and went, pick a freaking lane.
I think that the point that he often loses the point, basically, is my point.
It's
my point, is that he loses it. And it's a case of, like, what you meant to say, sir, was don't unnecessarily swear in your writing. Be authentic, but, yeah, nobody says, like, fuck every sentence.
The way he chooses to express himself in a book that he had the opportunity to revise and redraft as many times as he wanted and needed, and this to be the finished product, was challenging.
So the 20th anniversary includes 2 additional bits, at least, along with the book list.
I'm so glad that was in your copy. Thank you for taking that hit. Go on.
And I almost wonder if it's meant to make him seem more human, because the first section is from his youngest son, Owen King, who he's also co-authored with. I think they wrote Sleeping Beauties together. Owen is talking about recording audiobooks for him. And I don't mean like his books in audio. When Owen was a kid, like 10 years old, Stephen King went to him and said, I'll pay you like 9 discs. Here's some cassettes. Read these books to me. And so he's giving him things like Lord of the Rings and Dune and stuff like that.
Brilliant.
And yeah, basically Owen closes the door to his room, sits down, and he records himself reading these books for his dad.
Brilliant dad move.
Yes. And it does sound like he also did it with the other 2 kids.
I love that. That's such a good dad move.
Yes. And like, well, Stephen King told his kids that it wasn't to get them to be exposed to a bunch of stuff.
Sure it was.
Yeah.
That's exactly why
he gave
you do
them
that.
a bunch of different types of books to read. And it sounds like Owen King actually still has access to some of the cassettes for like Dune.
Oh, how cool.
And so it's just really cool. And again, he supposedly did it with the other 2 kids too. They all had done this for him. And so it makes him very human.
Yeah.
And it also shows a little bit of practicing what he preaches of, like, consume a lot of books constantly.
Look, I do believe in Stephen King and that he does the things he says he does. Yeah. I absolutely believe. And that they have served him well. That they have led him onto this path of success that he has created for himself. Props, sir. You've done the work. All of it. You have done the reading. You've done the writing. You've done the creating. And you have developed your own process. And you were gracious enough to attempt to share it with the world. I believe you get asked all these questions on the regular, people wanting a magic bullet as to creating a good story, etc. I just don't care for the way you explained it.
Exactly.
And you got some too, dude, that I don't understand because we've never met. And I don't know why you would talk to the people who are writing or paying to read your book about writing in such a way.
Yeah.
Even if it's what you believe, even if this is how you would talk to them at dinner, I don't know why you would talk to them this way in your book. What did you think about the writer's market? He was talking about the top 3 questions people ask, and one of them was, where do you get your ideas? The short answer, which he doesn't do anything short, I don't give a shit what he tried to say, is your imagination. And then, which is hysterical, because there were a lot of pages where I would read the page and then I would write the entire content of the page summarized in a sentence at the top of the page. I did it over and over again, which again, I would not talk so much shit and bag on him about it if you didn't say you were keeping this short to minimize the bullshit. Just don't say that part. Don't set my expectation that you made efforts not to be bullshit and then feed me a steaming pile of bullshit.
Extensively.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
Just don't say you're not going to do the thing that you turn immediately around and do. And we could get along a lot better. This could just land a lot better. Stop setting up expectations that are nonsense.
Be honest. Be honest. Do the thing you keep bitching about.
Yeah.
Be honest.
Be honest to your reader.
Yep.
That I feel like got lost somewhere. But the other question was, how do you get an agent and how do you make contact with people in publishing? And he talks about this book that you can buy called The Writer's Market. And it has lists of publishers and people in the industry and whatnot. And it's worth its weight in gold if you can get the places to start and then do your research and due diligence. And I'm like, is that even a thing anymore?
It is, or at least it was up until a couple years ago, because I actually have one. I think I have the 2016 or 2017 Writer's Market. Of course you would
know this. Go on. Tell me all the things. What is this book?
So it is legitimately a list of like publishers, agents, and what kind of like stuff they tend to take. So you have agents who specialize in like nonfiction or science fiction.
Sure.
You don't want to accidentally contact one with your historical romance.
I'm not trying to go to a body fiction publisher with my romance novel.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it gives you some idea of like the different genres people dabble in, and then like the publishing houses and what they do, addresses, websites. It doesn't like tell you exactly how to do anything, but it does also have like query letter examples. Oh. It's actually a pretty cool book. I didn't think to bring that with me. I probably should have. I don't even know if I know where my copy is, because again, it's years old.
Well, so that's my question. How often do you have to buy one? How quickly does that info get stale?
I can say, because I do have one from a year. It's either 2016 or 2017. And I had bought it that same year, because there at least used to be, assuming they still get published today, I'm not sure. They come out every year.
Okay.
So they do get updated, and they warn you like this information can be outdated. That's why we're just telling you as of this publishing,
Sure.
This is like how this worked.
How expensive is this book?
About $40 or $50, I think.
Okay.
Even in that same year, there were a couple of publishers that were out of business.
Oh, wow.
So shit like that does happen.
Sure.
But it also like gives you a listing of like people who take open submissions versus people where it's like, no, you have to know somebody. Don't even bother.
Don't.
So you can like
time.
nix them off your list of like, oh, that agent only takes established authors. You had to have at least published something professionally, or they ain't even going to look at you.
Wow.
So you can more like effectively send out your work, because it just kind of like also tells you how to read like submission guidelines. Because you can go onto any publisher's website and you can see like, this is what we take.
Okay.
You can also see if they're open for queries right now. And what does it mean? What do you send them? Stuff like that.
Sure.
It's actually a pretty cool like book.
It sounds like a potentially really good investment.
Yes. I would say like, if you are serious about trying to get your work out there, it is worth it if they still make them.
Okay.
And as of 2016, 2017, they did.
Got it.
Because I know that the next year one had come out. I just didn't buy a new one because I already have one. I wouldn't actually recommend buying one every year. Mm-hmm. If you are sitting down looking at like, oh, I want to submit something, maybe buy the one from your current year so it's not all out of date.
Sure.
But otherwise, some of the info is going to be the same because like...
not everyone is going to have moved on or changed.
Yeah. Tor Publishing is still Tor Publishing. They're a very like prolific fantasy sci-fi publisher. They are not likely to just suddenly go under.
Yeah.
But, you know, your little smaller people, yeah, I can totally see how that might happen. But I don't think you'd need one every single year. I think if you want to sit down and start sending out stuff, it's worth sitting and finding out. But at this point, things like that are starting to become obsolete in our modern world. Mm-hmm. this information is also readily available on the internet. We're making a podcast where I'm talking about, like, go onto the website and look at the submission guidelines before you send your shit over to them.
Well, I do wonder how much of that you could source online now.
Yes, exactly. So...
And if there's an online version.
And that would be my guess, is that there's probably an online version now.
I hate to admit it, though, because when I first brought it up, I was like, so much of what he uses in his language and vernacular is so out of date that I don't understand, and I'm old. And so I read about this, and I was like, oh, that's going to be ancient. That's not going to be a thing anymore. And it just goes to show you what I know. Nope. Good girl. Sorry. Puppy shenanigans.
So, yeah.
One small thing I noted towards the end of this book, Stephen King says he found articulating his thoughts about writing painfully difficult. But this was his idea. So I think on the one hand, I want to give him props for slogging through what was obviously not one of those sit down and dash it off in that throw of easy comfort. And you know, sometimes it just comes and it's easy and you love it and it's enjoyable and it feels like a nice nap at the end.
Yeah.
And other times you felt like you've been asleep or awake for 60 days in a row and you're hangry and you just really need to throw something to let all the frustration out. And I think this was that for him.
Well, and I mean, in reality, sometimes you bite off stories that are more than you can chew. And even if that story is supposed to be telling the nonfiction, like, writing experience that you had, it can be challenging.
How did this compare for you to reading his other stuff?
I mean, there's a douchebag writer in it.
But it's not fiction.
You know, that's true, but at the same time, I don't, like, I've always heard very positive stories about Stephen King. He's supposed to be a very, like, awesome person if you meet him in real life. And I know I've seen videos where, like, they're trying like hell to get him in the damn car and he just keeps signing people's books because they keep going, but wait! And he's trying to be nice. And obviously, yeah, he is hilarious on Twitter and he takes no shit.
Super funny. Even in this book, there were times where I was laughing out loud because he definitely can bring the wit and the funny.
It explains a lot about his writing. And I will say that I do think that I probably write more similarly to him than I do to other people who I've seen talk about writing. In that same sense of like, yeah, I don't always know what the ending's going to be. And
situation, not plot.
Yeah, kind of. I'd still call my situation the plot, but like, I mean, it is a situation, I guess.
Oh my gosh, I feel like it's like a situationship.
Yeah, exactly. It's something. I don't know what it is, but it's something.
That's so a situationship.
And I would say that personally, I believe I write dialogue fairly well. It is typically a thing most people compliment me on when they read my writing, is my dialogue between characters. I sit and watch people kind of like a creep. People are fascinating.
Y'all, this is your homework for this podcast. You need to go and sit and watch people and listen to them. A little like a creep. Not a lot. Don't get arrested.
No. Don't disrupt anybody, but I disagree with him on some points. I don't believe that there are bad writers. I don't even believe that there are bad books. I think that there are underdeveloped writers. I think that there are books that are just not for you. Even if, like, we talk about in terms of vocabulary or grammar and the things that actually compose the language being bad, we're the ones that made those rules in the first place.
I also think sometimes people speaking in their own way makes it more honest. This is how they talk. This is how their friends and neighbors talk. This is how their community would speak to one another. So people comfortable with that language would feel right at home.
Yes, exactly. So it's, I don't know, I'm hard pressed to agree with that. And I think that that's true of even his fiction of like, there's things in there that like I wouldn't have done. And characters do stuff that I wouldn't necessarily agree with or that I wouldn't have made them do. But I wasn't in his head when he was writing them. The characters take on their own shit. And this could... maybe this wasn't the character he thought he was making.
I do want to give him props for the honesty about all the things. He's been very candid about his substance abuse, about his childhood, about his situations throughout. And it's been, I think I most liked the context around where he was in his life for when he wrote What Stories.
Yeah.
I think that was really interesting because I do think it instructs his mindset when he was creating certain things. And so that was something I enjoyed.
Yeah. It's not all bad. I think you need to go into this book in particular aware of what you're going into.
Okay, so talking about there are no bad books. There are just books for certain people. Who is this book for? Who would you recommend this book to?
This book is for somebody who really wants to know a lot more about Stephen King specifically.
I was just going to say Stephen King fans.
This is not, I wouldn't really turn to this for writing advice. I would turn to this for, I want to know more about Stephen King.
Yes.
And I mean, I guess maybe we misunderstood. It does say a memoir of the craft. It does say it's a memoir.
I'm not letting it off on a technicality. I think very early on he establishes that this is a story, a book about the making of him as a writer, but also the writing process.
Yeah.
And I think he delivered on half of that. And maybe a quarter of the other half. He really did. There were some helpful nuggets. There were some great insights. But it was cluttered with this other stuff that I felt like really got in the way and borderline offended me at times.
That's fair. Well, and
if I want to be insulted, I'm going to go see an insult comic. I'm not going to read a book about how to be a better writer.
Well, and I think that there's some great quotes through this. I think that this book serves in, like, making Stephen King like everybody else. It reminds you that he's just another douchebag. You know, like he is a flawed human being who also has no idea what the fuck he's doing. He can't maybe realize that even his situations are plot. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just somebody else trying to figure it out every day. And he got lucky. He got lucky in that just the right storm happened, because there's tons of very talented authors out there who never get their stuff published. He didn't have to join their ranks. He was able to, he had the space, he had a supportive partner, he was able to make that work for him.
Yeah.
And it's just nice to also hear, oh yeah, no, you were working a crappy job, you're crammed into a tiny little room in your trailer with your kids and your wife, and you're able to find time to write where you're able to find time to write.
Yeah.
So.
Look, I think we love a good success story.
Yeah.
But then we also like to know that they're human, right?
Yeah.
You put them too high on the pedestal and suddenly society at large seems to want them to fall really badly.
Yeah.
So I do think this humanizes him.
Yes.
But I was madly in love with the human that came across the page all the time. He's funny. Oh my gosh, he's funny. He's sharp. He's very witty.
Yeah, I think if anything, that is what this book has served me, is that the guy who wrote some of these books where I'm going, oh my god, this book is so terrible. Why does anybody like this? How could anybody read it and enjoy it? Ugh. He's just another douchebag. And I don't say that in like a, oh my god, fuck him, he's the worst douchebag in the world. I mean, you've heard the disdain drip from my mouth when I talk about Neil Gaiman. He's just a guy. I
like to say we're all broken people just doing our best.
Yes.
And I think that he's in the club with all the rest of us.
Yeah. It makes him seem like a person and not like this giant faceless entity. Mm. Which I think is why I would say this is for Stephen King fans.
Same.
Because they do tend to revere him in a very specific way where people do classify him in with genius. He doesn't. He is self-aware enough to know he is no genius.
He's not shy or humble, though.
No.
That's not leaping across the pages either.
No, I am positive he would put himself in that group of, like, good writers, not competent ones. But it's not like he produces nothing but hits either. I heard Billy Summers was a terrible book.
He actually referenced one of his own and called it crap. Not in so many words, but said, not everything's going to be great, i.e. my book, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, was that a moment of humility, sir? What just came over you?
Yeah.
I was genuinely surprised. And also, if you're going to be a critic of everybody else, I appreciate you being a self-critic as well. Although, again, in moderation, you don't want to burn your own house down because you're so hard on yourself. So I do think the realm of critical eye with also some kindness and self-love goes a long way.
Yeah. Okay. So you gave us a writing challenge.
Why the fuck did I do that?
So let's talk about actually trying to apply his tools to the writing process.
Okay.
How did it go? We'll just start there. That good, huh?
Uh-huh. Well, one, I have to be perfectly honest. I made poor choices with my time, as I think I mentioned earlier. So I have to say, I had a vague notion of what I wanted to write about, which was a heist. I did some research, mostly via the form of true crime podcasts. Oh, and checking out armored cars all around me, which it turns out you see a lot more of than you realize. Start looking around, just see what I mean. And assessing their armor, their number of locks, what looks like bulletproof glass, number of employees driving, etc. And then I just sat down and wrote. And I did not give a whit for Stephen King's rules initially. So I did my writing, and then I went back through and came to, well, first of all, I came to an abrupt end because of that whole time thing. And then when I looked back through, it turns out in this particular instance, did a lot of Stephen King's rules on accident, without intention. So the first and biggest thing I looked for were adverbs. I was going to go through and strike out all the adverbs because boy, does he have a hard on for no adverbs. And because of how I wrote it, which was first person, sort of retelling my thought process through this writing exercise, I stink at writing dialogue. I love that you get creepy with it, but I sometimes just avoid it. It's scary to me, and it's not my strong suit. So I tend to steer clear of it. And I think that's where the adverbs pop up the most, as you're describing those situations where people are talking.
And how they're saying
exactly. Things. And so for me, there were no adverbs to strike through. Secondly, the character is me. And so I didn't develop it. I just spoke it from my point of view. And that character, I think, comes across the page as I am. A little sweary, a little direct, a lot loud, a bit scattered, and of a hot mess. And then in the end, with good intent. And so I think you do get that from my actions and choices and descriptions of things, which I think Mr. King would co-sign to emphatically. The plot, for those of you who want to check this out on Patreon, we'll see. I'm not going to give too much away. I did have a beginning and an end, and how I got there was sort of funny to me.
Okay.
But it's abrupt, but I got there.
Okay.
And the abruptness in my mind, at least, is quite funny. I'll know more once I read it to Kat and see what her reaction is.
Okay.
So I think I followed a lot of Mr. King's rules, but on accident. I did have a plot, though. Like, I had a thing in mind and sort of a general way that I wanted it to go. I think he might consider that a situation, though, and let me slide, because he seems unaware that plot and situation are the same.
Yeah.
Whereas I am not. So I feel like I'd just call it a situation instead and then be good to go. Overall, am I absolutely thrilled with what I wrote? No. I wish I had taken an extra 2 hours or so to really put my oomph into it. But for oh shit, Kat's coming over and we're doing the podcast today, writing, it's all right.
Okay.
Would I ever, it's funny as we're talking about this, I would never send anything I wrote, no matter how much time or pride I had in it, to Stephen King. Because in a book he wrote to the masses, he was sort of mean. And I can honestly say if he ever taught a class, I would never want to take that class because he seems like a shitty teacher with a low tolerance for the need for people to catch up and learn. And that's not going to be a person who's going to bring out the best in me. That's a person that I'm going to go home and cry and then not want to do that thing that I've been mocked for not doing well from the beginning.
That's fair.
It reminds me of when you start a job and you get in trouble because you're not doing it right and you're brand new.
Yep.
And you're like, how am I supposed to be a rock star at this? I've been here for 2 days.
I knew.
And they're like, well, you're never going to be good at this. And it's like, what?
I mean, maybe if you gave me the space and the tools that I need.
And the training. Yeah.
I feel like that actually feels like it's a reflection on you if you're looking at me saying, I'll never be good at this. What kind of a teacher are you?
But this is the same feeling and response I had to this book from Stephen King.
That's fair.
Especially as you noted when he's talking about the, quote, bad writers.
Yeah.
And even about his students. Which is hysterical because you're right in the personalization of him with his son. He sounds like a great teacher. He sounds patient and loving and smart about how he got those kids to do the reading and engage and participate with him. But as a teacher, I don't know. I'm just... bleh.
No, I think that's fair.
So I don't think he would like what I wrote, but not because I broke his rules.
Okay.
And I think if I took all the time in the world and wrote something awesome, I would never want Stephen King to see it. Because if he hated it, he'd call me out in some fucking book.
Yeah, he would.
I know.
He would talk about what trash you are in the book.
Here's an example of writing that followed my rules exactly, and it's still terrible, and here's why. Oh my gosh, you know what's so funny, though, is he had a passage in his book about writing, and he gave 2 examples, and the first example that he was using to show that it was trash was my favorite.
Okay.
Of the 2, I was like, I like this one better. So I think your rules are stupid. There were 2, it was something around the rules, and there were just 2 very small things he was using to try and illustrate his point. And I just, in reading it, liked the first version that he was saying was garbage way better. I'll see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. So, this made me laugh.
Okay.
It's talking about dialogue. So he's talking about, it's important to get the backstory in as quickly as possible, but it's also important to do it with some grace. So an example of what's not graceful, and maybe that's why I loved it, because I'm not particularly graceful. Consider this line of dialogue. "Hello, ex-wife," Tom said to Doris as she entered the room. Now, it may be important to the story that Tom and Doris are divorced, but there has to be a better way to do it than the above, which is about as graceful as an axe murder. Here is one suggestion. "Hi, Doris," Tom said. His voice sounded natural enough, to his own ears at least, but the fingers of his right hand crept to the place where his wedding ring had been until 6 months ago. So first of all, in that second section, it does not specify that Doris is his ex-wife. His wedding ring could be missing for any number of reasons, and Doris could be anybody. She could be a neighbor. She could be his best friend. She could be his daughter, for all we know. It doesn't actually communicate that information at all, whereas it is short, direct, and to the point when that broad walks in and he goes, "Hello, ex-wife."
I think it's that whole, advice people get real caught up in of, show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. And it's like, that's reasonable advice to an extent. But I do have to agree, hello, ex-wife is a very, that tells me a lot about the dude. He's kind of a condescending jerk. They are divorced. He's bitter about it.
And the way they speak to each other, it probably didn't end great.
Yeah,
done.
That works. Going to where his ring used to be. Honestly, the second one makes the character seem more sympathetic.
He's sad.
Am I supposed to feel sympathy for this guy in this moment? Or was he a bad husband? Which is it? Was she a bad wife or was he a bad husband? Because those 2 sentences create two very different dynamics for why their marriage ended for me.
They're dynamic. But to me, that second one didn't even get the exact information across.
No.
There's all of a sudden a lot more. You used a lot more words to create a lot more gray area. So your backstory should be graceful, perhaps, but the example you gave didn't land in the way that I think you wanted it to.
No, I agree. So you found that you already kind of naturally did some of these things.
I did. And I want to be very clear, 90% of that was my sheer terror of dialogue.
Hey, I think that that's fair. Like, for what I just said, of like, I've been, like, told I write dialogue well. My story doesn't have much in it. Mine has very little dialogue in it. As a result of, like, what I ended up writing about.
Oh, so, I'm intrigued.
I would say, like, I found I didn't use adverbs nearly as much as I thought I did. But that could be because, again, very little dialogue ended up being in this story. So I didn't really need it. I think the biggest edits I made was expanding the vocabulary, because the amount of times that I was saying, like, somebody pushed themselves up, I was going, like, this is ridiculous. Like, you keep getting knocked down and you get back up again. But we're going to say it a different way each time. Because this is ridiculous. And I don't, like, care for that every instance either, because the way you say that is just not going to sound right.
Yeah.
But the first time I actually wrote this, the first draft of this was handwritten.
Okay.
I hand wrote it out. And then when I rewrote it, I typed it up first as I had handwritten it. And obviously there were some mistakes, because I'm like, oh, where the fuck did that verb go? Why did I have a verb between these two words?
Because you were writing really fast.
Yeah, my hand was cramping and I'm just trying to get the ideas out really quickly. But I also found, like, I tended to do a lot of this stuff naturally. And going back through it with, the toolbox, it was a case of, like, I want to fix a lot of, like, vocabulary.
Okay.
Because I'm being repetitive with some really simple words. Because I'm trying to write it quickly before I lose the thread.
But that, I think, is a perfect first draft. And I think Stephen King would agree with the, like, second draft being the time to make those adjustments.
I'm proud of the story that I created. I'm not upset with it in any way. It is a story that I wrote that I wish I could find to read.
I love that.
I wrote what I have been looking for. So, in the sense, I was my own ideal reader.
Which I personally think is as it should be.
So, any other thoughts on the process before we get into the stories?
No.
Okay. So, if you are interested in hearing our audio versions of these stories, they will probably be going up on Patreon, or else I'm going to cut this in editing, and hi, future me.
We love you.
But either way, that is probably where they're going to live. So we'll go ahead and pull our card for now. Last time we had the Hermit, the symbol of introspection and solitude. He's achieved much, as indicated by his position at the top of the mountain. And his lantern is meant to guide his own journey as well as the seeker below him. While the hermit has summited the mountain, he is still searching for answers. Dun, dun, dun. And honestly, that does feel quite fitting with what we just read, like, as far as, like, outlook goes. Spot on! Spot on with the tarot. Would you like to pull our card for this episode?
I would. I'm going to pull this one, which is the Ace of Pentacles.
Ooh, Ace of Pentacles. The ace is indicative of a new venture that manifests in increased wealth or health. It is the beginning of attaining goals.
Y'all are all subscribing to Patreon, aren't you? Right now. Support your podcast.
You really want to know what those stories are about? The next episode, we are finally going to continue with The Shining. I believe it's like part 4. But yeah, we're getting back to The Shining. So, yay!
Woohoo!
There are other worlds than these. Go find them. Okay, bye.
You can can email us at manyconstantworlds@gmail.com, DM us on Instagram, and check out our Patreon. All links can be found in the description of our episodes.
We work really hard for the Patreon, and Megan gets mad if we don't say that.
We work hard for that money.
So hard for that money.